those who are not with us, they can look at it later and they will be able to see what we have done. So basically, when we are looking at this course, and maybe before I get into it, we will use various methods of going through the course. One of them, like after each lecture, there will always be an assignment. So after this lecture, there will be an assignment for you to do. It will be basically a multiple choice quiz, which can help you now to try and comprehend what we have done in class and maybe refresh your mind and also help you to go through the notes once again and see if you have understood everything well and if everything makes sense. So it is one of the methods we shall use, the multiple choice quizzes. Then we shall also have the practicals, like you get an assignment, you go sit down, design maybe a course, a class, something of that sort, so that we can see, and the goal of that will help us to see how we normally use ICT tools. Because when we are talking about ICT, it is going to be one of the mediums used in teaching and learning, and it is also a tool which is used to create the content that we use to teach or that we use to learn. So we shall use it in assignments in order for us to understand how we can apply it in different scenarios, how we can use it to learn and to educate our pupils as well in school. So we shall have that, and we will also have critical reviews of different literatures which have been given in terms of how ICT is used, the benefits of ICT, and challenges of ICT in early childhood education, just to understand. So we'll also be doing critical reviews. So we may not have like a sit-in cut, but our coursework will be evaluated through those three main methods. One we have said is the quizzes, the lecture quizzes, then we shall have the practical assignments, and we will also have critical reviews where you go and critique a paper, then you summarize your work, you come and present to us. So those are some of the methods we shall be using in the class. Then after understanding that, we will also look at the course outline, which I will also share in the V-Learning portal. So at the end of each class, I will be sharing the notes what we have covered and also the assignment that you need to do, and we agree on the timing when you need to submit it. So I will also be sharing the course outline. So I will just go through it briefly and I will share it. So by the end of this course, you need to be able to understand how you can use ICT to create instructional materials. That is one of the things you should be able to do. Then you will be expected to know how to use ICT for managing children's records. That will be another expectation. So one of the expectations, like we are saying, is one is using ICT to create educational material. Another one we have said is using ICT to manage learners' records. You will also be expected to use ICT to locate educational material on the internet. That will be another goal At the end of this class, you need to be able to do that. And also integrating ICT into teaching and learning. ICT into teaching and learning. So these are the big four expectations that at the end of the course, you will need to have acquired, or at the end of this semester, you will need to have understood how can you use ICT to create material for teaching and to help students to learn. How can you manage learners' records? How can you locate educational material on the internet? Like we will see in the course of this class, we shall be looking at different ways how ICT can be used. Locating material, it could be for the educator, who is the teacher, it could be for the student. So it goes both ways. And then integrating it into teaching and learning. How do you use these ICT tools for teaching and learning? Now, that is the main goal of the course. Now, for this, for today's course, we will try to understand the following. For today we need to understand what is ICT. That is one of the things we will try to learn. Then we will also try to understand the why. Why do we need, why ICT in ECDE? And here we shall be looking at both the benefits and challenges of using ICT, and also in general, what is this ICT? So that is something else we will try to understand. And then we will also be trying to see ICT in general. ICT in general, how it has had an impact. Because the reason why we are looking at it, it is agreeable. Since the year 2000, after we got into the new millennium, things have changed drastically. Previously, we used to have what we call the teacher-centered learning. But now, just like we are using ICT to interact, having a virtual meeting among ourselves, it shows that things have changed. So that is why we are looking at it in terms of the impact that it is going to have, or the impact that ICT has had, so that it can be used for teaching and learning. Like we see now, we can congregate in one platform and be able to exchange ideas and be able to carry out learning, meaning that now learning is not the way it used to be, the traditional setup, whereby you had to have a physical class with desks, and then the teacher would come into the class and teach. Nowadays, it is happening even virtually. So that is one of the impacts we are looking at, and it is also affecting even in the schools or our local environment where we are operating. Children who are being born today are being called digital citizens because they are born in an era where they are interacting with these gadgets. From the day they are born, they have smartphones in the house, they have TVs, which are also digital in a way, radios and everything, cameras, all these are exposing these children to some new environment which was not there previously. That is why these children are said to be more IT savvy, or they are more exposed into the technology. And failing to use the technology to teach them is like missing an avenue. So that is why we would try to understand that as an impact of ICT. So by the end of this class, we will try to understand what is ICT, why we need ICT in early childhood education, and then we will understand ICT in general, what it entails, and why we feel that it needs to be integrated into our teaching and learning. So let me continue by introducing what is early childhood education. So in the context of this study, I know you have defined this one in many other areas, in many other subjects. But when we are looking at early childhood education in the context of ICT, we are looking at education that is taking place to children in the age groups from 3 years to 8 years old. Those are the children we are looking at, and we are trying to understand about how they should be taught, how they should be using ICT, or how we need to use ICT in order to reach out to them, in order to teach them. So this study is exclusively on the institutional early childhood education. The reason why I am emphasizing on the institutional early childhood education is because even at home, like we have said, these children are also exposed to media. Like somewhere you will hear somebody telling you, or this class telling you, that a child should not be exposed to computers for more than maybe 30 minutes or 1 hour. But at home, they are exposed to the cartoon for the whole day. Or you give them your phone and they stay with it for more than 2 hours or 4 hours because it keeps them busy. So that is why we are looking at the institutional early childhood education, because it has its own framework and construct. But we are also saying that interest in other forms of partnership will also be taken into account, because just like any other form of education, early childhood education is going to involve other stakeholders like the parents and the institution itself, which creates the framework, which creates policies for education to take place. So the role of ICT at home will not be completely neglected. But we are saying here we are looking at early childhood for children who are between the ages of 3 and up to 8 years. And we'll be specifically talking about institutional education, but we'll also put emphasis to these other stakeholders at home and at the school. Then we move on. When we try to define what ICT is, because you know what ECDE is, early childhood education, that one I know you know. But let us come now to ICT. When we are defining ICT, it is a short form or an acronym for Information and Communications Technology. So ICT stands for Information and Communications Technology. It is also an extended synonym for IT, Information Technology. So when you hear about ICT and IT, they can be used interchangeably because one is a synonym for the other. Now, what is it? We normally talk about it in terms of the communications and the integration of telecommunications, that is telephone lines and wireless signals. Like right now, maybe you are attending this class through your mobile phone, meaning that you are applying some kind of telecommunication where some wireless signals need to be sent and received between your phone and your service provider, who is also connected to my laptop, which I am using to communicate with you. So that is why we talk about the communications aspect. But then that cannot happen without having the necessary software, the necessary middleware, storage, and audiovisual systems. So when we are talking about the software, most likely the software we are all using, there is a browser. Maybe I'm using Google Chrome to create this meeting. Maybe you're accessing it using maybe a Google Chrome or whichever browser which is on your mobile phone or on your computer. So that is what we refer to as software, but we will get into the details of that. Then middleware is that software or is that system which is in between you and the network you are connected to, which is supposed to translate. Computers will interact, or computers will operate in what we call machine language. But for them to communicate to you, they need to have what we call the high level language or the normal English language. So middleware is the one which translates the normal language you understand, the normal English language, to the machine language, the language of zeros and ones, so that it can be executed and you're given the feedback you're looking for. So that is what we mean by ICT. ICT will combine communications, will also combine software, will also combine middleware, storage, audiovisual hardware, so that users can be able to access, store, transmit, and manipulate information. The manipulation of information, we will look at it in more detail. So ICT, to define it further, will refer to any device or system that allows the storage, retrieval, manipulation, transmission, and receipt of digital information. That is how we define ICT. So here we are looking at personal computers, digital televisions, emails, robots. All of those are forming part of ICT. So it is not basically just a computer, but it goes further to anything. Even now we are looking at the world where you are hearing of cars that can drive themselves. That also becomes part of ICT because it is being controlled from elsewhere and it is able to move on the road on its own. It means that there is a computer system which is embedded into that car to enable it to move. So that is the normal definition of ICT. Now, when we are looking at ICT in education, now we need to come specifically to what it means. Now, ICT will contribute to the universal access to education. What we are doing now is an example of this, access to education, whereby you do not need to move from where you are seated for you to access this education. You can access it from the comfort of your home as long as you have the requisite hardware and software. Hardware could be your mobile phone, and software could be just what is inside your mobile phone, and then it has connectivity to the internet, and you're good to go. It also provides equity in education in that it doesn't matter what kind of, if you own it or you don't own it, as long as you have access, then you are equitably able to access education. And then the delivery of quality learning and teaching. This you will tell me as we complete this course, whether it was something of quality or not. But when we look at ICT in education, we are just saying that people are able to access. Now, it is not the case whereby people needed to travel abroad. You can attend an abroad university from the comfort of your home, access the classes, submit your homework, and everything via the platforms provided by information, communication, and technology. And then it is also providing efficiency in education management, governance, and administration. And we have seen during COVID times, people are able now to access classes online virtually. They are able to submit there to be admitted, to be able to register for units, to be able to take coursework and even exams via the virtual platform. And that is what we are talking about, education management, or what we call learning management. So that is the aspect of ICT being used in education. When we are also talking about ICT being used in education, we are looking at inclusion and quality are among the main challenges. So we are not saying that it is something which is sufficient in itself. It is still has challenges in terms of how is everybody included? What about that person who doesn't have access to internet or doesn't have a smartphone or a laptop? That is one question. Number two, the question of quality. Quality in terms of content delivery. Are you able to see everything? Are you able to understand everything? Like if you were in class? That is a big question which you will tell me as we continue. So that is one of the two challenges which need to be addressed as we move on, so that you can make it as realistic as possible. That is the only way education, ICT will be able to support education fully. But that brings about three sectors. One is communication and information, the other one is education, and the other one is science. When we are looking at communication and information, we are looking at the hardware and software, and then the networks which are connecting us. Then we come to education. Education is what we are doing now. Delivery of the content, creation of the content, and delivering it, evaluating students, all of that. But then there is the science. The science is the one which creates the technology. How advanced is it? So you need these three sectors so that you can be able to create an environment, so that you can be able to create a platform which is going to be useful, or which is going to enable the inclusion and quality of good education. Then we move on. When we are looking at ICT, like I had briefly said earlier, is that ICT has two sides, or it is perceived from two areas. One is an information medium. What does that mean? It means that it is, when we talk of a medium, it is like the rod or the tool which will be used in the delivery of the information we are talking about. So on one side, it is a tool. On the other side, it is also used as the education or the construction tool. Here, this is what we are saying. Being informational is that it helps in getting information and skills. See, like now, you are able to see what I am able to display to you, and you're also able to see what is happening in the classroom. At the same time, we will be using ICT to create, discover, and construct new knowledge. So you will be able to create some things on your own. You will be able to discover new knowledge, and you will also be able to construct new knowledge when you are using ICT. So ICT can be used as a delivery tool. It can also be used as a tool for creating. Just like we normally say, when you hear about computer science and information technology, computer science will be looking at creating the technology. Information technology will be looking at using the technology. Those are the same ways we are looking at technology, as one being used to deliver content, or to deliver knowledge, or delivering information. The skills is like what you have used to access what we are doing now. At the same time, it will be used for creating. Like I will give you an assignment, go and create maybe a class attendance, go and create maybe a class for today, showing maybe 1, 2, 3, and you go and sit down, create, and in the process of creating, you will be discovering some new tools, some new methods of doing things, and so on. So it is able to, and it is able to create new knowledge in you about things you did not know. Because as much as you have used computers, still there is something for you to learn. You'll be able to access it and look at something new which you didn't know before, and you will learn about it in the process of doing your assignment, in the process of creating your own technology. So that is why we talk about ICT having two sides. So one side is that one of delivery. The other one is the one for creating. So when we are using, or when we are using these two sides, one of them, the constructional side, is easily undervalued. Here we can sit down, and that is why I said our class is going to involve practicals, because we can look at the delivery. You are able to see, I will send you these things on email, or I will post them in the V-Learning portal and you're able to access them. So that is, I'm using ICT as an information medium. But at the same time, we need to use it as a construction medium, whereby you are able now to sit down, construct your own knowledge, discover new knowledge, and use it as well, so that we do not undervalue one of the sides. Even when you are using it with children in early childhood education, you can use it to show them, to teach them. When you are using maybe PowerPoint, like what I'm using, and you are displaying things on the board. At the same time, you need to let the children also access the computers, use the computers to do things on their own. And that way, you will have used both the information medium and construction medium. So, more and more authors use the term digital technologies instead of ICT. So you will find that digital technologies are being applied, but they mean the same thing as ICT to emphasize for the need of balance between informational and constructional sides of their integration into technology, into education, sorry. So when we are talking about using digital technologies, we just want to ensure that both informational medium and construction medium are both integrated and are both being used in delivering education content. So in our study, ICT will be understood in a broad and well-balanced sense that includes both sides. So this is something I needed to emphasize so that when we go to using in assignments and all of that, you don't get worried. Why? We are not IT people. Why are you telling us to do 1, 2, 3? I'm telling you to do those things so that you can be able to understand how do you apply technology into doing different things. So that is why I needed to emphasize on that. Then I continue and understand. So in the experience of childhood or in early childhood education, and with the spread of ICT and with cultural changes and with the early childhood education itself, it is evident that new technologies are impacting our children's lives. That is one thing we cannot ignore. That is why I was saying we need to understand what is the impact. New technologies, like right now, you can give your child a mobile phone, a smartphone, and they are able to perform many things which you don't know even they existed in your phone because they have been exposed. Like I had said, children are being born as digital citizens. Most of that, or most of us, we are grown-ups. We are what we are calling digital migrants. We were born in the age whereby when you went to nursery school, you were using sticks and stones to count or to count 1 up to 10. Unapanga miti ama unapanga tumawe. You know, that is the environment. We were using mud, matope, to construct things. Come to our children right now. They are using simulations or they are drawing things. Sio kama sisi tulikuwa tunachora kwa mchanga. They are drawing on the mobile phone. They are able now to use simulation tools. Na hizi tu apps za kutengeneza tu picha, kutengeneza tutoto tukiweka makeup and all of that. They are able to do those things. Things you yourself you cannot do, and it is your smartphone. That is why we are saying new technologies are impacting our children's lives. So they are able to access those. Young children have very differential access to new ICT. What does that mean? It means that these children, when they access your mobile phone, you are using your mobile phone maybe to chat on WhatsApp, maybe to communicate with others, to send SMSs and calling. So that is how you are using ICT because even those activities are ICT. But when our children access these phones, they are now performing these childhood activities like creating cartoons or accessing cartoons and trying to sing songs which we were being taught. But then they are accessing them on the mobile phone, on YouTube and all of those things. That is what we mean by children having a very differential access to new ICT. Meaning that these digital technologies, they are accessing them for their own childhood activities in a different way from the way we used to. Parents are sometimes unaware of children's exposure to these technologies and the material that can be transmitted through them. I am very sure up to now, like I had said, your child can do so many things with your phone, things you cannot do yourself. Sometimes anachanuka zaidi yako, they are able now to do a lot of things. Hata zile unajua umemwambia hapana usifanye hiyo, anajificha anajifunika na blanketi ndio usimuone, or they go to hide under the bed, and they sit and start doing things. And some of these things, because they are being accessed on the internet, the child can be exposed to other content which is not of their age. That is something very likely to happen. And when we will be looking at the benefits and challenges of ICT, that is one thing we will be looking at. Yes, sometimes they can access good content, they can learn new things, but in the process, they might be exposed to some things which they are not fit to be exposed to. So that is a danger which we need to be aware of. Also, parents vary in their ability to provide appropriate experiences and support for their children. Now, this is something because I am speaking from a parent perspective, but now to the teacher's perspective, you need to know that parents sometimes they lack the ability, or one parent may say my child hana shida kuangalia YouTube kitu kama hii, but another parent, depending on the cultural orientation, feels that no, my child should not access this. That is why we are saying parents are going to vary, and that is why we had started by saying that we are going to limit our study to the institutional orientation, because at home different parents have different approaches in raising their children. So some will say, my child should not access this, or my child should not even touch the phone. But another one is letting their child be exposed to everything. And those are things you will come across when you are teaching your children. One child will be very computer oriented. They will be able to perform things on the computer. Another child will be just watching and wondering, nini, nini. So those are things you need to be aware of because of the spread of ICT, the cultural differences, and our different orientations and upbringing. They expose us to technologies in a different way. Just like we normally say, children who are born town or children in the cities, wamechanuka zaidi wale wako kwa village. That is something which is also there. Something we normally call a digital divide. That is something you would find here. Meaning that there are some who are more exposed to technology and others are not exposed to technology like the others. And all of those will be your children in the same class. How are you going to take care of them? Also, many children have greater access to new ICT at home than they do in educational settings. That is something also you need to note. Like, I presume almost everybody nowadays, they have smartphones. So at home, children will be more exposed, or they will have greater access to new ICT than in the schools, where maybe access to the computer will be for like 30 minutes because the classes are many. But at home, this child can be exposed to the computer for more than 2 hours or even the whole day, depending. So that is why we are saying at home, they have greater access. Teachers are also under-informed. It is not just parents, but are also under-informed, and they lack confidence in relation to ICT. That is also something we need to take note of, in that most of us, like we have said, we are what we call digital immigrants. Like, we were born in another environment where there were no computers or there was no digital technology at all. And when we are already grown up, now we have been exposed to the digital technology. So we might not really know a lot, and we are under-informed. Another thing, provision of ICT in early childhood settings is also varying, and sometimes it is limited because of our orientation, which is traditional, so to call it. Sometimes you feel these children need to grow a little bit. Wanafaa wacheze cheze kidogo huko nje until when they are grown, maybe after wameingia huko grade 3, 4, ndio wakuwe exposed to computers. And so we limit, which is something we will discuss as we continue. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Also, communication between parents and educators about children's experience in this area is also non-existent. I'm not sure if many parents know if their children are doing computer studies or not, if their children have been exposed to this and that application in school or not, because sometimes ICT is taken like an extracurricular activity, and then children cannot be evaluated or they cannot be graded in their knowledge of ICT. And sometimes parents are not aware. So if they are not aware, they will not emphasize on whether their child needs to be exposed to ICT or not. But like we will see at the end of the day, just to make a note and be preemptive, ICT is the way to the future. We are already in the future. Like right now, COVID has forced us to be oriented into using ICT in a way we were not imagining. If you were told that you will be doing your courses online, you would have said no. I prefer the face-to-face class orientation. But now, due to COVID restrictions, it has become apparent that we need ICT so that we can continue with life. So, even as we move on to the future, almost every other activity, almost every other job will be requiring somebody to be IT uh, savvy. It will require our children to be exposed to different digital technologies so that they can fit in the society. So it will no longer be a luxury, but an expectation for them to use technology. So after having this understanding, let us understand why ICT. What are the benefits of using ICT in early childhood education? Number one is that it promotes efficient, effective, and interactive learning. Like, for example, here we are talking about the use of a PowerPoint or a video to easily and quickly illustrate a point than when a teacher writes everything on the board. Like you learn by doing. This is something we will come to do. Like right now, if I was to put up a picture here, it will be able to give you that mental understanding quickly that this is what you are talking about. But if I was trying to draw, yes, it may bring the same meaning, but it will have taken a lot of time, a lot of effort, which is not efficient and effective. But with the use of technology, it becomes very easy to put a picture in a PowerPoint presentation and expose it to children, and they will be learning quickly. If it is, I was to show you something, for example, and I come and tell you, click insert, then go to something like a picture, and then select a picture from something. By me showing you these steps, and you're able to see them, and then you try them on your computer, it will be very easy for you to understand. And that is what we are talking about in this point. Also, learners are highly engaged in the teaching and learning process. Now, when you are seeing things and you're able also to try them, it brings more engagement. That is basically what we are saying. Or it brings more attention to the learner, like they are paying attention to. It also promotes student-centered learning anytime, anywhere. Like I was saying, the traditional method of teaching was what we called teacher-centered learning, whereby it is only the teacher who can show you what to learn. And once they have shown you, that is it. But when we are looking at the student-centered learning, anytime, anywhere, after maybe I have shown you, you can insert a picture from your device. or from the computer. You click there, you go there. Now, any other student, maybe saved pictures, unaenda unachagua ile picha unataka, you insert. A student may go further to learn by themselves, anaangalia hapa kuna online pictures, ana click, and then they try to see, when I try to load pictures from the internet, how do I go about that? And they are able to learn by themselves. So that is why we are talking about student-centered learning. They will be able to learn something by themselves. Or it is not just pictures, they can also insert shapes here. Anaweza weka oval, click, anakuja anawekelea hapo, anaona imeingia. So with that, they are able to learn something by themselves. And that is what we are calling the student-centered learning. And we are saying it is anytime, anywhere. Because like we have said, children are also exposed to computers, to these digital technologies, even at home. So at school, they could have been limited to access to a computer to maybe 30 minutes. But at home, they are exposed to a computer by a bigger margin of time, maybe 2 hours. And since they are there, they can play around with the different activities in the computer, and they are able to learn by themselves. And this is why we are saying students can research and share knowledge. Like we will see, there is also what we are calling peer teaching. That is another advantage we shall be looking at. And that one comes in terms of when the student has learned something by themselves, they can also go and teach their fellow students. And that becomes even better because they are learning among themselves. Unlike when they are being taught by the teacher, the experience is totally different. Then we are also saying it is going to expand the learning time so that it frees it from the traditional school day or year. So unlike when somebody was limited to maybe a class period of 30 or 40 minutes, here they are exposed to computers or they are exposed to the learning material for a longer period. Maybe in a day they can also sit down on it and work on it for a longer period because it does not need to be just in class. They are able to access the material somewhere else and they are able to learn. So that is also another benefit of using ICT in early childhood education. We're also saying it facilitates the 21st century problem solving and critical thinking skills. So a student will not be limited to just the activities you have shown them. They can also be exposed to more activities which can enable them solve problems. Like maybe you were showing them how to insert pictures and then they learn how to insert different shapes. They can also learn how to draw. And when they are doing that, it becomes a little bit much better. So those are some of the benefits. Sorry about that. So another benefit is magnifying the inconspicuous details. Just like you had shown them one thing, but they can go on to learn about other different things, like these other details about when I insert a text box, what happens. And they can also try out things by themselves. That is what we mean by magnifying inconspicuous details or trying to find other things which you had not shown them or other things which they were not exposed to during the class time. It makes microscopic processes perceptible to learners, like some small activities which if you were explaining just by word of mouth, they wouldn't be able to understand. But by showing them through the computer, they can easily understand, like they learn by doing. It also enables the highest quality curriculum material to be available to any school because you are able to access material online on the internet. So it is very easy for these children to access this learning material. It is very easy for even the educator to access new material and give it to their children because we shall be looking at why it should be the educator. If you leave the children, they will not be able to know what is important or what is not important. Sometimes they take everything you find on the internet to be the gospel truth, which is not right, like we will see. It also promotes what we are calling creative thinking, and it promotes knowledge construction, which presents learners ideas and produces organized knowledge. When students are able to learn by themselves, they are able to also get some new ideas. They are also able to understand new things and move on. It also promotes critical thinking, meaning that they are able to ask, why is this happening like this? And how can I do it differently? If you had shown them, this is how things are done, they can go and play around and see what else can be done there. Like you could show your child, hii picha unaweza itengeneza hivi, unaweka filter, but they can also go and do other things, kuedit, kuifanya nini. So it helps them to be constructive, or they construct their own view of how they see things. And that brings about creativity, it brings about critical thinking, asking, if it can be done like this, why can't I do it like this other way? They will make mistakes, but they will learn in the process. So those are some of the benefits. When it comes to challenges, sometimes children are easily pulled to social media. And when they are pulled to social media, it is very likely for character assassination, or what we call cyberbullying. Mtu anaitwa majina, anatusiwa because ya zile vitu anafanya kwa internet, then they feel tutamuita hii jina. That is what we normally mean by cyberbullying, and it happens a lot. And when you will see, when we are talking about early childhood education, we are talking about the children who are under the age of 10. And at that time, their self-esteem can easily be affected. So that is something we need to really protect. Also, ICT can be misused. Instead of learning, people use it for social interactions. It could be the educators, it could be the learners. So you could create maybe a discussion forum in a class. And instead of them talking about education material or discussing education matters, they start saying hi, making jokes. I hope you have seen that in some different WhatsApp groups, where instead of people, a WhatsApp group has been created for maybe exchanging education content, and people start chatting other things. That is what we are talking about, misusing ICT for social interactions instead of learning. Also, if you are using maybe a TV or the internet in the classroom, then it can be misused or it can be abused, such that, during this class time, nitawawekea hii ka video waendelee kuona as we kill time. Those videos za watoto za kuimbaimba ama kufanya nini. Now that becomes like abuse of digital technology, because you don't have an educational objective, or you don't have the objective of putting that video. What are they going to learn out of it? Yes, it could be talking about creating something, songs for connecting students and learning ABCD, but is that the objective, or are you simply killing time? So that can also happen. Another danger is that the child may start believing that everything they come across on the internet is the gospel truth. That is why it is important for the educator or for the teacher to ensure that they are guiding their children on what to access and what is the truth, because many people post almost everything on the internet. Once they post it, how can the child differentiate what is the truth and what is not the truth? You have seen these memes or pictures whereby people edit them na wana post. A child may start believing hivi ndio vitu zinakuanga kawaida, but that is not the truth. It is just because they have seen it on the internet and they believe it. So it is important for the educator to guide these children. Also, surfing the internet, like we had said, can also lead to areas where the child is exposed to bad content, like pornographic material. And this can happen for learners and also the educators. So it is very important to limit and to control how surfing the internet is going to take place, especially when you are looking for education material. If it is for the children, you guide them. If it is for the educator, you have to really be specific which site you are going to and whether it is an authentic website or not. A learner may also have an critical mind because everything they see on the TV or the internet, they might start thinking that that is how modernity is or that is how progress is, especially if it is girls. They believe that mtu akipaka makeup hiyo ndio kukua progress, ama mtu akipaka makeup hiyo ndio mtu modern, ama kuweka nywele zinakaa aje and all of that. Yet that is not the truth. So not everything you find there is going to be the truth. Then it may make the learner become a mere spectator. Like if umewafungulia tu video and they are just watching and watching, they may just become mere spectators and they are not participating in the learning process itself. Also, learners can get glued into their computing devices. That is something happening even with our mobile phones, and children start becoming antisocial. They don't know how to relate with others because all the time they are glued on these computers or smartphones and they become dependent on them. They don't know how to interact with other people. They only know how to interact when they are on the computer, like kuweka message kwa social media and all of that. This is something which is also dangerous and it is a challenge when using ICT for early childhood. And here is a summary of what we have discussed. That meaning that you can displace other important learning activities and play activities. It also has negative impact on the cognitive development because they become dependent on computer. You know, there are people who are also dependent. Kitu yote ukimuuliza anaenda ku Google. Like they believe Google is everything. Whatever they want to understand, they will go to Google. And now their cognitive ability is impaired because they are not able to think on their own. Also, it has the social development. When we are talking about them interacting with other children, then it becomes a challenge. Also, physical effects, like when you are sitting in front of a computer for long, it may affect your eyesight, it may affect your back if you keep on sitting for long. Also, it may expose them to unsuitable content, risky contact, like those people who start maybe exposing children to bad content and inappropriate contact, wanaanza kulearn tabia mbaya. So all of those things are dangers of ICT in ECDE. So as much as we are using it, we need to be aware of those. So that is in a nutshell what ICT is and how it is used in early childhood, and then now there are advantages and disadvantages of it. Then we continue. When we are looking at ICT, it will be made up of hardware. And when we are looking at hardware, we are looking at computers, scanners, digital cameras. Then it will also be made up of software, where we are looking at applications like word processing, spreadsheets, database software, presentation software, like what we are using, the desktop publishing, all of those. So the C, which stands for communication, will be in things like digital TV, digital radio, emails, the internet, broadband networks like the mobile phones, the GPS, video conferencing, like this one we are doing now is a good example of a video conference. As much as we are not showing our faces and everything, it is a video conference because it has the aspect of video, what you are seeing on the screen. You are able to relate. So all of that combined, the hardware, the software, and the communication technologies create what we call a system. And so we need to understand what is a system. In the normal English language, we say it is an organized way of doing things. That is what we mean by a system, meaning that, you know, when I start, I will start with this, then go to this, or when we sit like this because of this and that. There is a system. But then that system will always involve input, process, and output. That normal way of doing things will be taking some inputs somewhere, process them, and then give output. Imagine in a shop, somebody comes and asks for maybe a loaf of bread and a packet of milk. That will be the input because it is a request they have made or an order they have made. Then you, the shopkeeper, you will process that order by picking what they have asked for, bring it to them. They give you the money. If you need to give change, you give the change. And output is handing over those items to the person who is buying them. So that is what we mean by the organized way of doing things. And every system will always have an input, process, and output. So in ICT, we normally talk about the system being a collection of the hardware, the software, and the communication links, as well as something we call peopleware. So we will talk about in ICT having hardware, software, communication, peopleware, or what you can basically call the user, and the data. Without the data, then we don't have a complete system. So when we are looking at an ICT system, we'll always have that. And we are going to look at it in a while. But when we are looking at the computer or the ICT system, you will have the user here. The user normally interacts with the application software. These application software are connected to the operating system. Operating system, we will see it. It is like the Windows or the Android operating system, which is on a mobile phone, or the Linux, which is command-based, so that the operating system is able to manipulate the hardware. And the hardware could be the device drivers like the hard disk. It also could be like the video drivers, like what we are using now to be able to exchange this information. So that is the basic components of a computer-based system or an ICT system. So these systems could include systems for paying staffs, that is like payroll, stock control, ordering systems, purchasing systems. So all of these systems, what they basically do, they follow the same analogy of human beings working. Like those things you do traditionally, like going to the shop and ordering. That is the same thing you can do using maybe Lipa na M-Pesa. That is the same thing you can do by using OLX. Umeangalia kitu kwa mtandao, umeona inakupendeza, you say, let me send a message. So all of those systems are mimicking the traditional way of doing things. That is why even our education system, which we can put up here and talk about e-learning systems, or what we can also refer to as learning management systems, you will hear those terms being interchangeably used. So all of these systems are trying to mimic the traditional way of doing things, and they help us to do these things we used to do traditionally. Like we used to study face to face, but since we are not able to do that, we are using an ICT platform to enable us do that. So that is what we mean. And all of these systems, like we have said, they will have these components in common. One will be an input, which will involve capturing or entering the data. So you will enter the data maybe through the keyboard, or other things like barcode reading. When you go to the supermarket and you pick an item and you come to the counter, it is passed through the barcode reader, it is scanned, and then you're able to pay for it. Scanning, like you scan a document and you send it. Also, even capturing the voice using the microphone. Those are methods of inputting data. So, the input will involve turning the data into a form that can be processed by the computer. Like I had told you, the computer will understand the language of machines, which is the language of zeros and ones. But you, the user, understand the normal English language. So this turning of the data from the form is what we call processing. And processing is performing actions on the input data. That is, you manipulate this data in a certain way so that it has some kind of meaning which can be acted upon. So it could be performing calculations, searching, sorting, arranging, presenting, converting, transferring, classifying. All of those are different ways of processing of data, which we normally talk about using computers. And then there is the process of output, whereby what has been processed has to be given out or has to be produced to the user. And that is giving the results or information produced after the manipulation. And all the system always have output. It could be the screen like here what we have. It could be the speaker which is producing sound. It could be maybe the camera or your phone, which when you take a picture, then you can see the image which has been captured. So all of those are different outputs we will see. Now, for those activities to take place in a system, they will need these components. People are the users, the ones who interact with the system or those who want something from the system, and we call them peopleware or users. Then there is the data, which is the raw material or raw facts. Like for example, if you went to the road, stood there and started by counting the number of vehicles passing, that is data you are collecting. Unasema between 5 and 6 p.m. on this road, there was a total of 50 vehicles which passed on the road. That is raw data which you have collected. Maybe you were using an Excel sheet. When one passes, you add one, like that. So once you have collected that data, maybe you are feeding it into the computer or your laptop or your tablet, whichever gadget you are using, that is data you have collected, raw facts. Or it is data of showing maybe today's class has been attended by 7 students. So that is a raw fact. Now, if you went ahead and started by analyzing, out of these 50 vehicles, there were 10 cars, there were 20 Nissans, there were 10 lorries. Now, when you are doing that analysis, you are doing what we call processing. I hope there you understand me, or I hope we are still together. So that is what we call processing. So that processing is just manipulating, because that analysis is a way of manipulating the data for it to have meaning. So when you have processed that data, in a computer, you need procedures or the systems now, what we call the software. These procedures are the ones which are going to determine what needs to be done and when it needs to be done. So that is passing of data or information between different people, administrative procedures like what needs to be done at what time. For example, if you picked something or if you were buying an item online, you go to a website, let's say it is Jumia or Amazon, you click on a book and then you put it on a cart. For you to be able to download it, you will need to pay for it. So you will click somewhere, enter the credit card details or your M-Pesa details so that it sends you a code, and when you enter the code, you pay. And after that, once you have paid, then you can download the book. That is a soft copy of it. So that is a procedure which will be followed in such a system for you to be able to buy online. And that is what we mean by procedures. They determine what needs to be done and when it needs to be done. Then there is also a component we call the hardware, the physical components, like they are listed there, the keyboard, the mouse, the screen, the CPU, the processor, the memory, all of those are hardware or the tangible components. The software are the computer programs or instructions which tell the computer what to do. And then information is the processed data or data which has meaning to the user. So those are the components you will find in any ICT system. So data will be a collection of independent and unorganized facts. So like we are saying, like now I could say this class was attended by 7 students. Now, if I start adding details to these 7 students, like start saying student 1 was this admission number, student 2, this admission number. Now I am trying to create information, meaning that this data has been processed and it will be presented in a meaningful way. Now, the process of data processing or the activity we are calling data processing is doing things in a sequence of steps or performing manipulations on this data so that it has some kind of meaning. Then the computer which we are using to do these activities will be an electronic machine that follows a set of instructions. Now, hizo set of instructions are the ones we are calling software. So it follows those sets of instructions in an order that it may be able to accept, gather data, and transform it into information. And this is what we are talking about here. So this is raw data which you could have collected. You enter it into the system. Once you enter it, the processing takes place by manipulating, maybe, and you get information organized in this way, just to show this is a percentage of whatever activity that was there, another percentage of whatever activity that was there. So that is what we mean by the whole system processing concept. So an information system will have 4 functions. Any information processing system will include 4 basic functions. One of them is to input data. The other one is to process that data. The other one is to store data. And the last one is to present or give an output of what has been processed. Now, when it comes to computers, there are basic units of measurement. Like this data we are talking about, if you were to enter it into the computer, it will be captured in terms of bits. A computer understands the language of computers, which we have said is machine language, the language of zeros and ones. Everything that we type on the computer, the processor will understand it in terms of signals, signals which are in bits or zeros and ones. So a bit is a unit of information that is equivalent to the result of a choice between only 2 possible alternatives. And it is the one we use what we call the binary number system. That is why we use the binary number system. I will not take you into the details of this, but in computers, we normally translate binary to decimal to hexadecimal because those numbering systems are the ones which the computer translates information through. But for the purpose of this class, you just understand that the computer or the smallest unit of data that can be captured in a computer is a bit. And a bit is either a 0 or a 1. That is why we are talking about a choice between 2 possible alternatives, whereby it is either A0 or A1. So that is what the computer understands. Then a sequence of 8 bits is the one now which can be able to represent a character. One character of alphanumeric data, maybe a letter, a number, a special character, or a space in a computer. That is why we talk about kilobytes, megabytes, and all of that. Because a 0 or a 1 is just a single signal, but you need several to create maybe a letter or a number, and that is why we are talking about a byte being a sequence of 8 bits, which now can be captured inside the computer. And is the one we are saying is the one which can be able to represent either a single character, which can be either a letter, a number, and so on. And this is what we are talking about. So in the computer or in the computer hardware, you are using the keyboard as the user, you are typing, and when you are typing, that electrical signal will go into the processor, which is the CPU, because when you press the keyboard, a signal will be sent representing something, and that signal is 8 bits, which we are showing here. Those 8 bits will go into the processor. It will interpret, because the processor now understands the machine language of zeros and ones. It will interpret, and then you will see that displayed on the screen. What you had pressed on the keyboard as A is this one combined in these electrical signals, and then sent to the processor. It translates and displays the output on the screen as an A. Hapo tumeelewana ama binadamu amepotea? Just say something, nisikuwe naongea peke yangu. Up to there. Do I make sense or we are completely lost? Lois, are we together up to there?
Yes, but somehow I'm floating.
Wow. Where are you floating?
From the point of ICT hardware.
Oh. Now, when we are talking about ICT hardware, they are these tangible components, like the keyboard, which we are showing there, the CPU, which we are showing there, and the monitor. Those are the tangible components. When we are talking about computer hardware, we are talking about the things you can touch and feel. The software is the one which is taking the instructions. Like when we are talking about the electrical signals, they will flow through the software. Because for you to type something to appear on the screen, you will be using software like PowerPoint, like this one I'm using. So I hope there it is clear. So when I'm typing something, I will be using either an application like PowerPoint or Microsoft Word or Excel to do those specific activities. But then that Excel is just, or that PowerPoint is just for me to see what I understand in the normal English language. Like nikitype A, I can understand A in my own language. But the CPU cannot understand A. It will understand 1000010, like that. So it is the work of the operating system to translate, or it is the work of this application to translate this A, which I have typed, into some zeros and ones. So that is the work of the application or the software. It translates it into zeros and ones, which now the CPU can act upon and display on the screen. So in between the user, there will be the application software. Like if I can, let me see. Let me see if I can explain this in a better way. Just a minute. I'm trying to find a picture which can easily explain. Now, if I can try to paste this here. Now, are you able to see this picture?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Yes.
Now, the user will be typing on the keyboard. Just trying to see. The user here will type on the keyboard. When they are typing, they are using hardware. Hardware, it is the keyboard, it is the screen, and then inside the computer, there are different applications. When we are talking about applications, think of Facebook. Najua kila mtu anajua Facebook. So unatuma message at that time. Facebook is a software, or maybe WhatsApp. It is a software you normally download on your mobile phone and then you install. Ukiinstall itakusaidia kutuma message. So when you are typing on your phone, touch screen yako, you are giving the processor of your mobile phone some instructions. On your keyboard, wewe unaona vitu zime A to Z, the keyboard the way it is. But those instructions are being translated by the operating system of that mobile phone into the language of zeros and ones. And that is the software which we are talking about, so that it can be taken to the hardware. Those instructions will be taken in form of zeros and ones into the system for it to be able to work. Hapo make sense? Ndio uweze kuona kitu ina display on the screen. There is that process we are showing here, that utatype kitu on the keyboard, whether it is on your phone or your machine, and then it goes to the CPU, inakuwa translated and acted upon, then inatranslatiwa back into what you can see on the screen. Hiyo ndio process normally wanga inaendelea. Okay. And somebody says it is clear now. I think we can move on. Then those basic units of measurement, when you have 1,000 bytes, you form what we call a kilobyte. When you have 1,000 kilobytes, you form what we call a megabyte. When you have 1,000 megabytes, you form what we call a gigabyte. 1,000 gigabytes, they create a terabyte. Those are units of measurement or storage, because the computer also stores that data or that information. So it needs to be measured that way. So it is also part of that. And the basic hardware ndio hizi tunaonyesha hapa. You could find the speaker, the keyboard, the mouse. This is all hardware. Whatever you can touch, then it is hardware. And the basic hardware, it will have the CPU, And when we are talking about the CPU, it is the brain of the computer, or it is the one which performs arithmetic and logical operations. Arithmetic ni ile ya ku-add na ku-minus. Logical operations ni ile ya you are typing, you are trying to sort things, you are trying to list, you are trying to do what. Hizo vitu zote zinafanyikanga kwa CPU na ni kitu kanatoshana hivi. If you were to open a computer inside, it is a very small thing, but it is the one which does all of those activities. I don't know if I can enlarge this diagram. So it looks like that. This comes from different manufacturers. That is its work. Then there is the memory unit, and the memory unit is where the programs and data are stored. And the memory is of two types. We normally have the RAM, and we also have the ROM. The RAM is what we call the random access memory, and it is in use when you are working on that data or when power is on. If you switch on power, if you switch off power, then whatever was contained in that storage will be lost. But read-only memory is the one you store your data and programs permanently. So ni kama vile una install kila kitu kwa simu yako, hata ukiizima na restart, you will find everything there because it is in the permanent storage. But kuna vitu vingine ungekuwa unafanya and then you shut that application before unge save, and then you will not find that data there again. You will have to start from scratch. That is what we mean. And here is just the graphical representation. The storage, the permanent storage ni kama hii hard drive ya computer ama ya simu, which now you can access data, documents, programs zinakuanga installed hapo. But the random access memory ni saa ile umestart maybe Facebook ama WhatsApp, ukistart then it is loaded into the random access memory, and you could call that your table ama mahali unafanyia kazi. So the random access memory could be like your table where you are working on, and that is where anything you are working on is stored until you save it or you delete it or power goes and it is lost. But before then, if you save it, it goes into the permanent storage. Then we also have input devices, the ones we have said: keyboard, mouse, joystick, microphone, webcam, scanner, monitor, touch screen. You know, your touch screen is also an input device, but it is also an output device, because hiyo screen bado unaitouch ndio bado inakuonyesha output of what you are doing. So those are the different components of hardware. Then we have software. Software, we have said these are the instructions, because the computer without the software is just an electronic gadget. Your mobile phone without the software, kama hiyo mobile phone yako haingekuwa na Android, haingekuwa na Facebook, haingekuwa na WhatsApp, haingekuwa na contact, it is just useless. But when it is installed with software, then it has purpose. So any electronic gadget without the software, it is useless. The software is those instructions which tell the hardware what to do. That is the basic meaning of software. Instructions that will tell the hardware what to do. And they are of two types. We have system software and application software. When we are talking about system software, these are the ones which enable the software to interact with the hardware. So there we have system software like the operating system, like Windows, Android. Those are examples of system software. We also have utilities. Examples of utilities are like the antivirus software. We also have, the antivirus software. The program development software are found in that category. And then we also have device drivers. Device drivers, they are the ones which enable other devices to be connected on your machine. For example, if you had a laptop, ukikuja na USB mpya, you just plug it in, unaona inakwambia wait a minute, is installing, and after that it is good to go. That is a device driver which does that activity. So those are the examples. And when we are talking about the system softwares, they manage resources like memory, processor, storage, and devices. They are used for providing user interface. If it is Windows, if it is Android, if it is the Norton antivirus, they are the ones which provide user interface. Interface ni ile kitu unaona ukiinteract nayo. So examples are like the Windows. These ones I know you know them. Application software, they are used for performing specific data processing activities. Like if you are talking about Microsoft Office, it has Word. Word is for typing text. It has Excel. Excel is for doing calculations and listing things. It has PowerPoint. PowerPoint is for creating presentations. So all of those applications are used for specific data processing activities. And that is why they are said to be specialized, because they do specific activities. Like if it is WhatsApp, it is for sending messages and communication, you know. If it is like maybe what, Facebook, it is for social interaction and so on. So when we are talking about user interaction, it can be either the command line interface or the graphical user interface. There are these two. Command line interface, you will find it in Linux operating systems, the one you have to key in commands. So if you don't know the command, you are not able to use that operating system. But the one we are used to is this one, the graphical user interface, where we have icons, menus, and dialog boxes. Unafinya tu ka button fulani kama haka ama hivi, and you are able to perform different activities. That is the one we are calling the graphical user interface. And then at the end, we have files. Files are the ones which are going to collect our information. So they could be a disk inside the computer, or a diskette, or a USB device, or a CD, a DVD. All of those are what we are calling file systems, which are supposed to store our data. And that file system will always contain a unique name. Whatever you store in your USB, ukiweka file mbili zimefanana itakwambia you need to change one of the names. So it will contain the file name, which should be a unique name. And then it also has two parts. One is like the file name and the extension of that file name. So if it is a Word document, it will have the .doc. An Excel document will have the .xls. The PPT will have the PowerPoint will have the .ppt extension, just to show which file type it is. So that is how we organize files inside our computers. So that is where I beg to stop. Any question up to there?